Okay, so when it comes to Outland sponsorship applications, a lot of you have been asking, can the sponsor leave Canada while the sponsorship application is still underway? Meaning you've sponsored your spouse who's outside of Canada, so this makes it a family class or Outland application. And now you as the sponsor wants to leave Canada because the sponsorship process is lengthy, so you want to be with your spouse, or you just want to visit family, or there's an emergency and you want to travel back to your country, or you just want to take a vacation. Totally understandable, right? So in this video we are going to cover these three questions. Can the sponsor leave Canada while the sponsorship application is still in process? How long can the sponsor be away from Canada? Essentially, how long can the sponsor travel if they are traveling? And when is it safest to travel? So let's begin. Okay, so as always, I'm going to start with what I did. In October 2021, I sent my wife's spousal sponsorship application using the new permanent residence online portal. And by the way, AOR to PPR timeline covered in these two videos, so watch them in sequence, this one first and then this one. Both videos linked in the description below. So about a month and a half after sending in my wife's application, I traveled to India. I went to India on December 9th, 2021 and I was back around December 25th. So when I came back at Pearson International Airport, Toronto, at immigration, I was not asked any questions. All the officer asked me was how long was I away from Canada. So I just told the officer that I was away for 2 weeks and that was it. My travel did not affect anything related to me. My travel also did not affect my wife's spousal sponsorship application. So let's get deeper into this. So I tried to look up some travel related information on the official spousal sponsorship guide on IRCC, but I couldn't really find a direct answer. All I could find was this information about becoming a sponsor on this page. This is the guide 5289. You must already be familiar with this if you have done your application or are in the process of doing it. So if you can look here, you can become a sponsor if you are a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. All right. So obviously you have to be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident to become a sponsor. If you are a Canadian citizen, as it says right here, you can even sponsor from outside Canada. You must show that you plan to live in Canada when your sponsored relative becomes a permanent resident. So Canadian citizens can sponsor from outside Canada, right? But it says here you cannot sponsor someone if you're a permanent resident living outside of Canada, okay? So even though this is not really travel related, I really wanted to stress on this point because a lot of people ask this question, can I really sponsor from outside Canada as a PR? You can't. You have to be inside Canada to sponsor. So it doesn't really give any direct indication on whether the sponsor can travel outside of Canada when they have sent in a sponsorship application already. But it clearly says that you have to sponsor from inside Canada because the sponsor who is a PR has to be living in Canada to sponsor. So let's try to simplify this. If you're a Canadian citizen, obviously you have much more relaxation when it comes to travel. Assuming you have sent in your spousal sponsorship application and your spouse lives outside of Canada, you would obviously want to visit them. So you can definitely stay outside of Canada for as long as you want. And you can also even sponsor your spouse from outside of Canada as long as you can prove that once your partner becomes a permanent resident, you'll come and live with them in Canada. All right. So we are not really going to discuss much about the citizens who are sponsors and want to travel because obviously they have much more relaxation in traveling. But if you're a permanent resident who has sponsored their spouse who is outside of Canada, then you have to think about travel carefully. Alright, so what does this mean for sponsored travels? So let's take this example. You, the sponsor, are in Canada. You've already sent in the sponsorship application for your spouse who's outside of Canada. Let's assume in India. So since the spouse or the principal applicant is outside of Canada and the sponsor is inside of Canada, this becomes a family class or Outland application. However, you might be doing it online or on paper. We'll get to that in a second. So now the question is, you want to travel back to India to visit your spouse. Can you really do that? So based on my own experience that I just shared with you and the research that I've done, I can tell you with confidence that you absolutely can travel. All right. But when you travel as a PR, who sponsored their spouse who's outside of Canada, there are a couple of things that you need to keep in mind. So let's look at those. Alright, so as far as the length of the trip is concerned, I would say 2 to 3 weeks is what I found based on my own personal experience and talking to people, talking to subscribers and researching on forums. 2 to 3 weeks is a considerable period that you can travel. Because if you travel for a short period of time, within a month, then they understand, meaning the immigration and IRCC understand that you can have emergencies and the spousal sponsorship process is obviously long and you may need to take a vacation, so it's allowed. There is no harm against that. But if you really take long trips, let's say you are out for a couple of months after sending in your application, then it can get risky. Now, some people have even traveled for long periods and they have traveled back and they haven't had any issues. And these people, I'm talking about sponsors who sponsored their spouses outland. So when they came back, they didn't have any issue. So they might say to you that, you know what, you can travel for as long as you want, but I would not recommend that. As a sponsor who's done the outland application, you should remain in Canada for the entire duration of your application, and you can take short trips. 2 to 3 weeks is considered okay. All right. So this brings us to our next question, which a lot of you have been asking. Can they really find out how long you were away and where you sponsored the applicant from? So to this, I would say don't take the custom officer lightly. Okay. They have access to more information about your status than you probably do yourself. All right. So let's take this example. You're a PR and you sponsored your spouse who's outland, and then you travel back. Now, when you come back to Canada, when they scan your passport, they can easily determine from your entry and exit stamps, if they wanted to, that how long you were away from Canada. Also, when they are retrieving your information, they have access to so many databases that have critical information about you, such as your criminal history, your travel history, your family information, and all the applications that you might have submitted. They have so many databases that they can pull this information from if they wanted to. So it's just a matter of luck if they don't pick and choose that particular database on that day and they let you through. But let's say you went to India after you sponsored your spouse and you came back after several months and your sponsorship application was still underway. When you come back, they can easily pick that information from that database, and then it might become riskier. They might question you that why did you travel for so long? Why were you away for so long? This is also true for people who think that they can sponsor from wherever they are living right now with their spouse and then come back to Canada. The officer is not really going to know where they sent the application from. All right, so don't make that mistake, because again, they are going to easily match your entry and exit stamps, and they will know that you sent the application on this particular date, but you traveled to Canada on this particular date, and there is a gap. And then you might be asked to explain that gap, that why did you send the application from outside of Canada as a permanent resident when you're not really allowed to. You have to sponsor from inside Canada. Okay, so the idea behind explaining this to you is don't try to game the system, don't try to work around the system, follow the guides exactly. If you are a permanent resident, then you have to be inside Canada to sponsor, and keep the travel short. 2 to 3 weeks is a safe zone. Any longer and you are risking it, all right? So now you're confident about your travel plans and you're excited to visit your spouse back home. So the question is, when can you actually travel? At what stage of your application is it safest to travel? So this would depend on two different scenarios, if you've applied on paper or applied online. So let's assume you've applied on paper, then I would recommend at least wait for the acknowledgement of receipt or the AOR email that might get delivered to your mailbox. And then once you know that your application has passed the completeness check, that's when you can travel, because once you pass the completeness check, further down the line, the chances of rejection of your application are low. They're not non-existent, but they are low. All right. So once you receive the AOR, you can feel confident about your travels. All right. Now, if you absolutely have to travel, let's say there's an emergency and there's nothing you can do about it, then I think it's okay to travel, but talk to a regulated professional or an immigration lawyer to be absolutely sure about your travel plans. All right. Now, if you've applied online using the new permanent residence online portal, then you have much more leeway in traveling. You can even travel before receiving the AOR. That's what I did. I had sent the application on October 2021 and I received AOR January 2022, but I traveled in December because it was my anniversary and I wanted to be with my wife to celebrate that moment. So I traveled even before receiving the AOR and it was all right. But if you're not really sure about your application and whether or not it will pass the completeness check, then it's advisable to wait at least until you receive the AOR and you know that your application has passed the completeness check, so you can be at peace and then you can make your travel plans. All right. Hope this clears your confusion about travel. So if you've sponsored your spouse and you want to understand how to track the status of your application, then this video right here should definitely help you out. And then if you want more details about who can track and at what stage of your application can you track, then watch this video next. Alright, so with that said, I wish you good luck with your application, safe travels to those who are traveling, have fun, bring gifts for your family, and remember to keep the travel short. Goodbye.